I'm delighted to see so many of you here to hear our first speaker and to welcome those who are listening on the internet. There's no doubt that, as you might have seen on the screen, if the first slide would show up, that our first speaker will be talking about smartphones and artificial intelligence. And he is asking us the question, which one is affecting our lives more deeply? There's no doubt that smartphones and artificial intelligence are affecting the way we interact with each other, the way we get our information. Think, for example, in fact, also of the way that some teenagers spend hours and hours each day on social media, and how they are deeply affected emotionally, some of them, by this source of information. Think also of all the citizens of all ages, essentially, being hacked on the internet, some of them with deep consequences, emotional consequences. So there's no doubt that these media are affecting us. But I only mentioned the negative aspects. There is a silver lining to mobile devices, as I'm sure we are going to hear about from our first speaker, Dr. Jeremy Cooperstock. Dr. Cooperstock is a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computing Engineering at McGill. He's the Werner Graup Distinguished Chair in Automation Engineering and the founding member of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Music, Media, and Technology at McGill. I could list many awards that he has received during his career, but in the interest of time, because I know that Dr. Cooperstock has a lot to say, I'll refer you to our website, the Muro website, the conference website, and to his own personal website for more details. I remind you that following the presentation, we will ask two of our sponsors to come and say a few words to you. So I would ask you, after the question and answer period, to keep your seats for a few minutes more. Okay, so I think we're about ready. Dr. Cooperstock, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I guess thank you to Rosemary for grabbing me last minute to pitch in here. The theme I'm replacing for the talk that was originally scheduled deals with social despair. And as I commented to Rosemary, my topic will be very consistent with that. I will give you lots to be pessimistic about. But first let me give you the upside. And as all of you as academics, former academics, what's a professor without a lot to say? I'll nevertheless try to keep myself to the 30 minutes, so respect the time limits here. So to lead in, I want to give you a little bit of a picture of the silver lining, the good sides of smartphones and AI. Tell you it's not all miserable out there. There's a lot of good reasons to be optimistic and encouraged about the technologies. So a little bit about my lab's history in these areas. We started in terms of working with these kinds of devices way back before these devices were phones, when they were just simple, interactive personal assistants, right? The early iPod days before they had the SIM cards inside. And our first project in this space was looking at a mobile treatment for amblyopia, otherwise known as lazy eye, which affects about 2% of the population. And the premise was that the conventional treatment at the time, which involved patching the strong eye, led to problems in terms of compliance among children, because who wants to walk around with a patch all day long? It had poor outcomes in terms of the overall success rate. And worse, it actually affected a large number of patients in which their good eye became weakened, so that they were relying on the weak eye rather than the good eye. So overall, kind of not great success, and it was thought to work only for adults. So working with an ophthalmologist at McGill, we devised a system that was based on a game activity that children could play, and in fact adults could play, that did not require patching, but instead took the approach of splitting the signal of the game so that both eyes had to be engaged in the process in order to play the game. The idea was that if you present the weak eye with a stronger contrast signal than the strong eye, both eyes would would send their signals to the brain, because amblyopia is not a problem of the eyes, it's the brain saying, I'm going to ignore information. So you give the weak eye a stronger signal, and the brain looks at it. And so here's the signal that would go to the, they're normalized contrasts for us to see. One eye would get this signal, the other eye would get that signal. By virtue of a cover or a lenticular overlay on the iPod that steered the light differentially to the two eyes, so that the brain, when fusing the information together from both eyes, would see this image at the bottom. And those of you who've played Tetris know you can't play the game if you're missing some of the blocks either at the bottom or falling. So when you play the game successfully, it meant that your brain was seeing the information from both eyes. And this technique turned out to be very successful. It was found to work not only in children but in adults, and some adults that were pilot test participants in our study actually recovered 3D stereo vision. So they were seeing effectively not just in both eyes but actually perceiving depth. So dramatic transformation enabled by the early days of smartphone-like technology. So we went fast forward from that into other topics, looking at how we could leverage wearables and smartphones as the communication medium to further enhance communication where you didn't have to be looking at the screen all the time. And the idea here was that members of a couple, so boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, would each wear this sort of ankle bracelet monitoring device, which was at the day a simple smart Pebble watch, and it would pick up the motion of your legs and transmit those as an encoded signal to your partner, where they would get a series of vibrations. And what we found is that over time, couples wearing these devices would start to have implicit awareness of what their partner was doing. Oh, my wife is coming home from work. Oh, my husband is playing ball with the kids. Oh, they're on the metro. Oh, they're cycling. Because the patterns of vibration we would convey would easily, after about a day or so of wearing these devices, become part of your background information. And what was fascinating is that this technology transformed the way couples communicated with each other. Rather than pulling out their phones to text and say, I'm coming home now, their partner would just feel them coming home and be aware of it. So raises all sorts of ethical implications and so on, but it was an interesting side of how we could harness smart wearables, smartphones, and so on to improve communications. Another project we got involved in, we have a lot of research in my lab working with the blind community, was how we can leverage the power of smartphones to pick up your context of what's going on around you. And the idea here was to tap into data sources that are available in terms of geographic databases, knowing what is on the street around you, where are you located at present, what buses and transit lines are near you, and collate that information together based on knowledge that the phone has as to where you are, how fast you're moving, what direction you're facing, and so on, and what information you're interested in, to present to you a sort of neon sign representation of what's on the street, what is around you, for somebody who doesn't have visual capability. And here's what the system looked like in its initial release. If we can get audio turned on.
Lucio Dentino have never been to this part of town, and navigating a new area is always a challenge for the blind.
Unless you smell like the bakery, or unless you hear people walking into a store or a shop, you don't necessarily know that there's a shop there.
But these two have an advantage.
Out to 70 meters in front of you are one bus stop and one intersection.
They're testing a new iPhone app that describes what's around them.
Restaurant. Lagra di Alibaba. Ice cream.
Oh, ice cream petite. Oh, wow.
Helping them find local highlights they would normally walk past.
When we're looking for a specific place like a drugstore, we don't have to count doors anymore as we did before.
The app is called Autour. It's the first of its kind to be developed in Canada. It's available in major cities, and it's free.
Bus stop.
The app compiles data from Google's social...
So that's a little bit of our use of smartphones, and we can get more. There are videos online that talk about the whole project, still being used by hundreds of people around Canada every day. And let me switch gears now, just sort of suspend the smartphone technology for a bit and talk about some of the powers of AI. And I'm sure I do not need to tell you about the benefits of AI, but just to give you a little glimpse in terms of some of the uses that we're making of it in our lab, we have a project fitting here for adults who are retired. So looking at adults in long-term care facilities, adults who are living by themselves, to provide them with the power of AI and the sort of chatbot type technology, not only a social conversation partner, but also a digital nurse's assistant. So we wanted to offload some of the burden of our overburdened nursing staff and engage with the clients in communication, in conversation, to gather some of the information relevant to long-term psychosocial assessment. How is Jane doing? How is Steve doing? Is their emotional state stable or are they declining? What about cognitive function? What about verbal fluency? Is there an anomaly that needs to be brought to the attention of care staff so that we can have intervention in a timely manner? This is something that consumes a huge portion of nursing staff time in facilities working with older adults, and we thought, well, let's leverage the power of AI to do so. So we've done a sort of prototype initial pilot test with Villa St. Rose, and we should have, hopefully, a video demo of what the system is like now.
Hello, Adina.
Hello. It's great to hear from you. How have you been feeling lately? Have you been able to keep up with your walks in the garden and your gardening activities?
I tried to follow your advice, so I went on a little walk this morning in the garden.
That's wonderful. How did you feel after your walk? Did it help with the stiffness in your legs?
It did feel a little bit more better after the walk. I feel I worked some of the muscles, but when I was gardening for a long time, my legs did feel a little bit more stiff.
It's great that the walk helped. For the stiffness after gardening, it might be useful to take short breaks to stretch or switch positions to avoid staying in one posture for too long. Have you tried alternating between different gardening tasks to keep moving?
I'll try that next time. Thank you, Adina.
Okay, so that's a little glimpse in terms of some of the benefits of all these powerful large language models and how we can combine them with compelling visual presentations of a human-like figure and then provide the sort of powerful diagnostic capabilities that the AI is able to present. Now, combining these technologies, when you have the power of the back-end intelligence of the computer married to the delivery system of a smartphone, there are all kinds of exciting things we can do. For example, again, working with the blind community in terms of some of the guidance we can provide to points of interest like a bus shelter, to a doorway, safely crossing the street by understanding through the sensors that the phone has to navigate. Okay, here's a crossing, here are cars coming along, there's a doorway. Let me give you step-by-step guidance, a little bit to your left, 5 meters in front, reach down to the right, there's the door handle. And we found great success in these kinds of capabilities, continually refining them, but it's still always more development in play. And our most recent project is looking at the education side, in particular for blind students in elementary school, taking educational material like this life cycle of the jellyfish that is otherwise inaccessible to students without vision. You can provide them a textual description of what's going on, but of course they lack and lose out on the richness of this diagram. So what we've been developing is the means of tapping into these powerful large language models to analyze the graphic, and this is the kind of output we get where the system captures both the text on the life cycle, so pulling out the text, but also looking up and getting extra information about the phases of the jellyfish, extracting the links in terms of where are the arrows that go from one phase to the other, and then through a second phase, segmenting out the bounding boxes around each of these stages of the jellyfish, generating contours so that we can describe their shapes, and then the possibility of rendering those shapes on a refreshable tactile display, such as made by Humanware just out here in Longueuil, in the South Shore, that renders a relief, like a printed sort of tactile experience that students can have navigating their fingers over the elements, and as they tap on each one, getting the audio display to tell them what they're experiencing. So trying to make a more equitable and inclusive environment that allows for blind students to benefit from the same educational experience as would be available to their sighted peers. And we're also working in sort of daily living support, for example, in retail, helping guide users to products on the shelf that they're trying to find, verifying they've got the right items, and so on. Okay, so that's a little bit about what's going on in our lab. I'll skip all that. But let me go back to the core question as to which of these technologies has more profoundly transformed our society. So let's start with AI. How has AI affected us? We hear AI in the news constantly. We hear about the risk of job loss. We hear about the threat to civilization and so on, the good and the bad. Let me first give you the picture in terms of where is AI at present in terms of its perceived power versus its actual strength. So when we talk about narrow AI, that's AI that's tuned for a very specific niche kind of application domain. We have at one end, the low end of performance. We say sort of 50 percentile of the sort of skilled human population. We have things like our voice assistants, our digital assistants that we talk to. Google Home, Siri, Alexa, and so on. Do this for me. IBM Watson doing its basic drug and medication prediction of this patient should be prescribed drug X because they exhibit these symptoms. Does a passable job. But we will still rather have that very skilled human that goes beyond the 50th percentile to give us our drug diagnostics, to be able to tell us how to operate certain machines in our home and so on. So that's basic. Then we go to the higher level, the expert level of performance that is considered to be on par or exceeding the capability of the 90th percentile of the human population. So things like grammar and spell checkers, right? Trust the computer rather than your friend. Graphical synthesis, generate for me a photograph or an image of a cotton terry cloth elephant standing on a field. Boom, something that a skilled artist would take a day to produce, you get it in a matter of seconds with these tools. It's quite amazing. And of course, we've long heard of the power of the Deep Blue and beyond chess playing programs that defeat the human grandmasters, protein folding analysis that do better jobs than any team of humans can. So these are exceeding the 100th percentile of human capability, the power of AI. And it's been here for a while, and these kinds of 100th percentile and above tools are gradually kind of moving down that spectrum and taking more and more of the roles that we previously ascribed only to the capabilities of human expertise. Then we have ChatGPT that everybody is exposed to and bombarded with. Back about a year ago, the OpenAI Foundation claimed that approximately 23% of US adults had already used GPT or ChatGPT. And at that time was claiming 300 million active users worldwide every week. So not exactly dominating the world, but definitely playing a significant role in terms of number of people who are turning to ChatGPT, just as we used to turn to Google to tell us, hey, what's the answer to this question? So there's AI having a transformative role in the way we interact with our world around us. In terms of the time that people spend with these tools, the average time, 13 minutes per session. I don't know how many sessions per day, but imagine you're on once or twice a week. You're spending a reasonable amount of time. It's not consuming you entirely, but you're getting a lot of value for that investment. However, on the flip side, there's been a lot of analysis that these large language models are actually just bloviating and generating garbage as output. Just like a skilled BSer can pretend to be intelligent, all they're doing is weaving together cool sounding words, like a lot of journal articles we read, that don't really say a lot, but that sound convincing as demonstrating erudition. So is there really something there? It depends on the training data. A lot of things you get out of AI is dead on, very accurate, extremely helpful. A lot of it is garbage. And our ability to discern and discriminate between the garbage and the value is a big challenge. I was just hearing this morning of some debate where the speakers were commenting, with social media, we know it's likely to be garbage, right? We have an inherent distrust for what we're told through social media. At least I hope we do. With AI, we usually go, oh, the AI told me that, it must be right. But oftentimes it's not, and that's the point of this paper. But on the positive side, beautiful example from not so many months ago, when Trump first announced the planned tariff deployment against Canada, the Bank of Canada had their experts sit down and try to model the effects on the Canadian economy. What would happen if Trump came out with his 15% or whatever percent tariffs on Canada? The team of experts worked on this for a week. After some time, they came back with their prediction. They said the Canadian economy would likely contract about 6% in virtue of these effects. So a noted economist in the US decided, let me run the question through an LLM. So she asked DeepSeek, at the time we were allowed to use it, we're not anymore, to create a model and simulate the effect on the Canadian GDP. 18 seconds later, DeepSeek came out with the answer, and it was almost dead on with the same answer provided by the Bank of Canada experts who toiled on that question for a week. It provided the full analysis in terms of the effect on the labor market, on imports and exports, on economic production and so forth, coming out with all the reasoning behind it, explaining the same thing. Pretty impressive, right? So, Bank of Canada, maybe time for some layoffs, save a little bit of the economy, I don't know. All right, so let's talk about the impact of smartphones. So first, what about their penetration? We know there are about 8 billion people in the world. In terms of unique mobile phone subscribers, just using mobile telephony for communication, roughly 3/4 of them, right? 5.78 billion people in the world have some form of smartphone. Almost all of them are using those phones to access the internet. So smartphones equals internet use. They dominate what's out there. You talk about people going online, it's not with these devices anymore, it's with your mobile handheld. And of course, the benefits from those tools are enormous in terms of all the things people are using them for. Information communication, mobilizing support, building communities, influencing public policy, not just the personal, let me find out, the next video I should watch or what the weather is. We go back to the time spent on these tools. So ChatGPT, mentioned before, 13 minutes per session. The average time spent not on the phone, but on social media platforms, which are overwhelmingly spent on the phones, you're looking at over 53 minutes per day just on TikTok, 48 minutes per day just on YouTube. You add all that up, it's a scary number, okay? The average time spent daily on social media by adults in the US, 2 hours, 19 minutes every day, okay? And what do we get for that? Been on a bus recently? That's what you see. Okay, so what are the habits like? Let's break it down. 81% of adults are checking their phone within 10 minutes of waking up. 43% consider themselves addicted. 66% use their phones on the toilet. Lovely, okay? And how many times do you pick up your phone to check? Ooh, did I get a new message? Ooh, what's that beep? 200 times a day. Anything else you do 200 times a day? I breathe, right? So phone use is becoming akin to breathing in terms of how much it influences us. The average American, forget social media, spends 5 hours a day on their phone. That is looking at the screen. Okay? Using social media for their activities among teenagers, 4 to 5 hours a day, depending on male or female. What is the result? Ooh. Okay? I can't do anything right. Almost half of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders are saying that's the case. My life is not useful, 44%. I don't enjoy life, 48.9%. That is, thank you very much for these, right? Okay, Steve Jobs, the man who brought us the iPhone. Does he let his children use it? Did he? Okay. Tim Cook, new Apple CEO, or current one, won't let a child use social media. Bill Gates, Microsoft, under 16s using social media, not a smart thing. Okay. Aside from that, how about informing ourselves of the world around us? Where do we go for our news? So if we look at the basic sort of spread of all the information sources where we can get information, 60% of adults in Canada, as of almost 2 years ago, were turning to Google. Not terrible, right? Google will give you pointers to news articles and extensive coverage and so on. 58% using online local Canadian newspapers and magazines and so on. But 56% were turning to Facebook. Okay. Now, when we look at the breakdown by demographic and ask where do you get your daily news, if you go for the Consumption from adults 55 and above, 66% or more were turning to TV. TV again for business news, radio news down at about 35%, printed newspapers, community newspapers, TV news websites, and so on. Notice what's lacking there? All of the social media side. Turn to a younger demographic, 35 to 54, and you've got social media coming in there at over 25%, as where they turn to get their daily news. And you look at the younger generation, boom, almost 80% are going to social media. That's TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and so on. That's where you form, or they're forming, their vision of the world. And they're the ones who are the decision makers coming up for the future. What happens from that? Well, social media's effect in Myanmar. Penetration of traditional technologies in terms of communication was lacking. The phones came in. With the phones came preloaded with Facebook, and Facebook was exploited for disseminating massive social unrest, racial violence, inciting violence against an ethnic population, and Facebook was forced to admit that they played a role in that. We've got other risks when you combine social media and you bring in AI. Well, Yoshua Bengio, just here in Montreal, noting that we've got a thing that we don't necessarily know how to control. So what happens when that something is smarter than us and is relegated more and more responsibility? It's a little bit scary. Using AI, hate groups have used the tools to spread anti-Semitic disinformation. And we see the consequences of that as we just did this morning or last night. Deep fakes. We look online, we see a video of some politician talking. Is that real? Or is it a deep fake? Hard to tell nowadays. And fake news, it's not just a political slogan. We know that it's out there, and it's been targeting individuals in elections, undermining our democracy. So what's happening is when you have things like TikTok that are modeling individuals, figuring out what appeals to them, what's going to get them excited, get those eyeballs on the screen, you're enabling foreign actors, not you, but the big companies out there are enabling these groups to target, to carry out espionage, sabotage, endanger civilians, undermine our democracy, and so on. This isn't just political hype. This is why we need to be scared and worried about those technologies. So, back to the two sort of emblematic names behind these fields. Steve Jobs with a smartphone, Jeff Hinton, Nobel Prize winner on AI. They both raise the alarm bells about their technologies. As powerful as they are and beneficial, there are concerns. So, what do we do about it? Call for action. Mark Weiser, who was the chief technologist at Xerox PARC and a great inspiration of mine, came out with an article years back about inventing socially dangerous technology. And he said, as engineers, we have a responsibility to do two things. First, the obvious, build it as safe as you can. Put in all the safeguards to prevent misuse, abuse. But number two, which is critically important, and we're starting to get more and more of that from the fields. We have the Netflix sort of docudrama on the social dilemma, right, the dangers of smartphones, success a few years ago in sort of promoting discourse. And we have all the warnings from the AI thinkers. Tell the world at large what you're doing is dangerous. Get those discussions happening. Try to influence public policy. There's not a lot we can do about reining in AI around the world, but we can have some effects in terms of how these tools are used and deployed, at least locally. So we've got our Minister of AI, Evan Solomon. What's he going to do? Well, he's not talking about reining it in. He's talking about the economic benefits. So he's got the positives, but let's worry about the negatives as well. Because the negatives are big. The negatives are serious. This is all the big names, not all the big names, but a lot of the big names in the field have signed on to this statement talking about how AI could be equivalent to thermonuclear war, right? That's how serious it is. I told you I'd leave you with great feelings of optimism today, right? Okay. Now on the smartphone side, we've got some progress. Schools across the country, or school boards, are starting to institute bans, including right here in Quebec, saying, take the phones away. Kids want to play with them at night, that's okay, it's up to the parents, but in the school, during the hours they spend there, let's try to reduce some of those 5, 6, 7 hours a day in front of the screen down to a more modest number by saying, you can't have them here. So how's that working out? Well, in Ontario, not so great, right? The question is, the ban has been toothless, it hasn't been enforced effectively, kids have access to it in the locker rooms and the bathrooms, you have to get rid of them entirely if you want to be effective. Is it succeeding? We'll see over time. So bottom line, trying to stick to my time here, which has more profoundly transformed our society? We can ask ChatGPT for the answer, right? I'm not going to give it to you, right? So, really interesting. Smartphones changed how we interact with the world, but AI is changing how the world itself operates, right? Both hugely influential in transforming the world around us, for better or for worse. Hopefully, we can reign some exercise of control over what happens, and that we actually get to see another generation or two of humankind. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for a wonderful talk, and in addition to sticking with the schedule. Thank you very much. We have time now for some questions, please.
Put up your hand.
Yep.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about the environmental impact of these devices? Thank you.
So in terms of environmental impact, there's good and bad, right? The bad, we know AI is a huge energy hog, right? It's, I can't remember what country was recently making deals to have access to some huge energy infrastructure to power their data warehouses that were driving the AI compute. So right now, I think the last numbers were still single-digit % of the world's energy supply being consumed by AI and data centers responsible for them, but that number is going up. So the impact on the environment in terms of consumption of energy sources is going to be a draw. The nice thing about it is that AI can be moved anywhere. So where you have access to large solar farms or wind farms and so on that don't require consumption of natural resources or non-renewables, at least they can be put there. So a bit of a mixed bag there, but it's definitely a big impact to consider. Production of these guys, energy intensive for sure, but it's a one-shot effort to build each of them. The problem is they're thrown away every year, right? How many people, I've got to get the latest one. And the real issue is not so much the energy that goes into them, it's the natural resources. There are certain minerals and metals that are only extracted from some countries, often under slave labor-like conditions that promotes more social unrest, and those minerals are disappearing. So effect on the environment, it's something absolutely to consider. But on the flip side is that one of the promises of AI is that we're going to see advances and solutions being proposed to mitigate some of those harmful environmental effects, solving disease, solving problems of the economy, and so on and so on. We've seen some demonstrations of this to a low level, and hopefully it will improve over time. So again, it's that mixed bag. You don't get the good without the bad.
I appreciated your real-life energy and enthusiasm. Credentialed professionals often give answers that are like AI hallucinations.
The mic's not on. Stop. Turn that mic on.
Great, thanks. I appreciated your energy and enthusiasm in real life. Credentialed experts sometimes give answers that are really hallucinations. Free information is often misinformation, but the best information is often hidden by paywalls. The people in this room all have access to the world's literature, paywall free, but most of the public don't have access to that. How can we get a public that's critically interested and thinking about issues when we make them pay for real information and give them other stuff that's advertising, essentially? Yeah,
you raise a real problem there, which is I would argue it's not so much a question of incentivizing individuals to access paid information. It's incentivizing individuals to be interested in the first place. And at the younger generation, I think we've lost that battle. So let me really add the pale of gloom to the discussion. The kids in 10s up to 20, whatever, their brains are already wired. And it's that instant need for the cool thing, the catchy video, whatever's going to excite and scare and heighten those emotions. They're not interested in the deep read. They don't want to look at a 5-minute article when they can get the 2-second AI synopsis. So saying, oh, we'll give you this great medical information, this lengthy journal study that's normally behind a paywall, or an insightful analysis of these political debates that's going to take you 15 minutes to read. Very few of them would care if you gave it to them for free. It's like, I've got cat videos to watch, right? So you and I are interested in these things. We'll take the time. Maybe we'll even pay for it. But I don't think the solution is we make information free. We have to make the information appealing. And you know what? You don't want me coming up to tell what McGill should do, because the people over in the James building don't want me talking to you. So.
Okay, there's a question here. Please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Mura should have served some antidepressant with the breakfast.
But you see, you made everybody laugh, so there you go. You've solved it.
I have two things to ask you. One is it why is the world not able to do anything about it? Is it because we are so globally interconnected, and taking a policy in the small little Canada is not going to do anything in China, and so forth? Is that one big problem, or the problem? What do you think?
Well, that's, certainly on the AI side, we know that we can't stop here. We can't stop in the West, because there's always going to be another player who has the technology, and they're going to continue advancing, and it's the arms race. So this is where I'm really pessimistic. My wife says, always lead with a solution, right? Say, what should we do? So we've got Mark Weiser talking about telling the world that what you're doing is dangerous, but how do we stop it? I don't have that magic. Nobody's got the magic bullet, right, as to how we stop it, because that race, the AI genie's out of the bottle. And with regard to social media and smartphones, sure, we can put bans in schools, but then kids will come home and spend their time there because it's appealing. How do we stop that? I don't know. I really do not have a solution.
The other thing I was thinking about is this marriage of the two, smartphone and AI. Is it the algorithms that is killing it? Because someone who doesn't like Trump is being fed with all the news only that from people who are writing against or saying against Trump, and the other side.
Yeah.
Is that a bigger problem?
Well, that's not so much the bigger problem. It's the specific amplification of human tendencies that we seek out people who agree with us. We read news stories that appeal to our own senses and reinforces them, right? The echo chamber of thought and so on. When you've got the tools where the algorithms will help do that in a clever way and get you infuriated at the right time to make sure that you spend longer on their platform, as the algorithms do to sell more advertising, of course it just magnifies the situation. And when you look at, there's beautiful graphs out there that show the polarization of North American population in terms of Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, and so on. We see that with the advent of smartphones, just like in those graphs, I didn't comment before, but where the graphs spiked in terms of despair among teenagers and so on, it started with the release of the iPhone 4, when social media became prevalent. Same thing when you look at graphs about polarization of political discourse. Smartphones came out, and the population, rather than being largely central, started pushing to the extremes. That's what those tools have done. They've amplified the extremes on both ends and pushed people through into those echo chambers of thought. And again, rewiring our brains to think in that way so there's no common means for discourse.
The migration which you described from the analog to the visual and the variables in the earlier experiments, just now the smartphone is very much the visual. But all 5 sensory communications which the variables are bringing in, is there a kind of future hope that there may be other ways of bombarding ourselves with or connecting with others on that? Could you project something? Are you working on something?
Absolutely. So, I mean, my lab, the logo we have actually shows 3 of those modalities. It shows sight, sound, and touch, and we work with all 3. I bristle at the idea of bombarding our senses with more information. That's what we're trying to avoid. We know that typically our visual channels are overloaded, and what we're working towards, and a lot of other research groups as well, at ways of offloading some of that burden on our visual channel that's already overtaxed and giving us valuable information, not more social media, but actual information that helps us achieve our tasks through other senses. So we're working on this, for example, in medicine, where clinicians who have to attend to a patient, rather than having them constantly glancing at the medical monitor, see what's the heart rate, oxygen level, blood pressure, and so on, they get that information through a wearable. It's provided through them constantly in the background through pulses on their wrist. And they can start to interpret, just like that pebble watch around the ankle, they start to develop an innate background understanding. Audio, of course, and these devices, by the way, they're impoverished in terms of their ability to provide tactile information, but they do provide some, right? You get little buzzes if you turn on vibration mode, but there's a lot more that can be done there. And they're already very rich in terms of audio capability. So they're already exploiting those 3 senses. Smell and taste, it's always been a sort of an eclectic mix of crazy researchers. What are the fun things we can do there? They're usually not very powerful means of conveying information. They're good for experiential kinds of effects. But certainly on the 3 of tapping into visual, auditory, and tactile or haptic senses is something that can be hugely beneficial in terms of improved information communication. I don't see those as any means solutions to the problems I outlined in terms of AI and smartphone addiction and the woes to society, but certainly in terms of not having us being exhausted with this constant, fire hose of information that comes at us. Those are means of doing so, and we're working on that.
But we spend lots of time on Walkman once upon a time. Our generation, you're too young.
And no, I had a Walkman. I still have a Walkman. Yeah. yeah. We can use those effectively.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question. How do you compare this, or how does it differ with the other technologies that we had in the past, like TV and radio, where people were also very pessimistic?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Every generation complains about the next one, right, in terms of what's happening, and the problems we're confronting are all the same. But there's a fundamental difference between the current technologies we're dealing with and the old ones, in that the current ones are engineered on the social media side, on the sort of the wearable addiction, to be addictive, right? It's not just a matter of let's entertain you and give you something. It's targeting individuals. The technology is steering personalized content by modeling and developing a knowledge of you that exceeds your closest friends. Right, you hear all these stories about people who are casually chatting about, I don't know, the daughter is engaged, whatever, and next day they get a coupon in the mail for diapers or something, right? Because these technologies have such deep awareness of what's going on in your life and what you're thinking that it's co-opting or it's hijacking your brain. Whereas the old scale or old school entertainment sources didn't do that. With AI, we hear people talking about the transformative effects of that technology are on par with the invention of electricity or possibly even fire in terms of its effect on human society. So, like rhetoric, which has more profoundly transformed our society, they've both had these enormous effects that not just rival, that dramatically surpass anything we've seen in the past since we emerged from the Stone Age. There's no comparison.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
We've heard a number of commentaries about why people are driven towards seeking what you could call bad data, swamping out good data. And we've heard a lot of talk about why people go in those directions. But surely the thrust of this discussion is how we can make AI, which is automated, ultra-automated, select and flood the environment, if you like, with the good data. How we can inform AI how to seek unbiased scientific resources and prioritize them. We should be, the thing is here with us, and it should be. The automation should be, and the work should be done on our behalf by these automatic systems. So should we not be discussing how to force AI to select the scientific sources that we know are good? I don't mind a 2-second synopsis. I use them all the time. But I would much prefer seeing them if I knew they came from a good data source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there have been, I mean, that's an excellent point. There have been some initiatives. I know the US was discussing maybe 2 years ago, and the policies just came out roughly in the last 6 months or so, where companies in the AI space had to have in place certain efforts to ensure that the data that was being harvested for training their models was more authoritative and wasn't just garbage. The problem is that doesn't sell. So there's an economic disincentive for companies to put out models that just give good outputs. There's value in garbage if it's going to bring more people to view it. So this is where that discussion, the policy, how do we enforce that? And if you have those good models, but I can go on DeepSeek and get the bad stuff and it's more entertaining and it seems more kind of hip and cool in the response, it's an international free-for-all. And we can't just control one place and one service and have the solution for us. So I agree the spirit and the intent is right, but the mechanism to make it work is the challenge. Thank you.